the metallic scent of blood mixed with pine needles as Sarah Chin pressed her back against the shattered oak tree. Her medic's bag felt heavier than her grandfather's medical texts ever warned her about. Through the smoke drifting across the Belgian forest, she could hear him, shallow, desperate breathing punctuated by foreign words she didn't understand. The German sniper who'd killed 3 of her unit members lay 15 meters away, his rifle shattered beside him, crimson spreading across the snow like spilled wine. His gray uniform was darker now, soaked through. She could see his chest rising and falling in the erratic rhythm of a man bleeding out. Sarah's fingers found the morphine in her bag. Military protocol was clear: treat Allied forces first, always. But her medical oath whispered different words: do no harm, preserve life, heal the wounded regardless of the uniform they wore. The sniper's breathing grew shallower. In maybe 2 minutes he'd be gone. Her commanding officer's voice echoed in her memory. That bastard put bullets through Johnson, Martinez, and young Tommy. She closed her eyes and felt the weight of her father's stethoscope around her neck. The one he'd carried through Pearl Harbor, the one he'd pressed into her hands before she shipped out to Europe. What would you do? Save the man who killed your friends, or let justice take its course? Sarah Chin hadn't planned on becoming a battlefield medic. Before the war, she'd been studying to become a pediatrician at Stanford, following in her father's footsteps. But December 7, 1941 changed everything for Japanese-American families. While her parents were sent to internment camps, Sarah had volunteered for military service, a chance to prove her loyalty to a country that suddenly questioned it. She'd graduated top of her medical training class, earned the respect of men who initially saw only her race and gender. But respect meant nothing when bullets started flying. The German sniper coughed, blood speckling his lips. His eyes found hers through the drifting smoke, pale blue, the color of winter sky. Not the eyes of a monster. Just a man, probably someone's son, dying alone in a foreign forest. Sarah's hands moved before her mind could stop them. She crawled forward through the snow, her Red Cross armband visible against her olive jacket. The sniper watched her approach, confusion flickering across his pain-etched features. Americanish. Arst? He whispered. She nodded, already assessing his wounds. Shrapnel had torn through his shoulder and abdomen. Without immediate treatment, he had minutes, not hours. I'm going to help you, she said in broken German, the words her grandmother had taught her as a child suddenly precious. His eyes widened. Warm? Why indeed? Sarah's training took over as she cut away the sniper's uniform. The wounds were severe but treatable, if she acted fast. She found his identification tags: Klaus Richter, 19 years old. Barely older than her youngest brother. Klaus, she said, and his eyes focused on her face. I need you to stay conscious. She injected morphine, applied pressure bandages, worked with the precision her instructors had drilled into her. Klaus watched her every movement, his breathing gradually steadying. See Retten, Michigan, he whispered. You're saving me. Sarah didn't respond. She couldn't explain what she barely understood herself. All she knew was that letting someone die when she could save them would destroy something inside her that no enemy bullet ever could. As she worked, Klaus spoke in halting English. I did not want to kill. But orders. His voice broke. The young one, he looked like my brother. Sarah's hands stilled for a moment. Tommy Martinez had been 18, fresh-faced, full of stories about his girlfriend back home. Klaus had put a bullet through his heart. But the man bleeding beneath her hands wasn't a faceless enemy anymore. He was Klaus Richter, 19, who spoke of brothers and reluctant killing. She finished bandaging his wounds and gave him water from her canteen. You'll live, she said simply. Klaus gripped her wrist with surprising strength. Danke. I will not forget. Sarah heard voices approaching, her unit, searching for casualties. She stood quickly, shouldering her medic bag. Don't tell them I was here, she said. Klaus nodded once before closing his eyes. But Sarah had no idea that this single act of mercy would soon determine whether she and her entire unit would live or die. 3 weeks later, Sarah's unit, the 23rd Infantry Medical Detachment, found themselves trapped behind German lines after a reconnaissance mission went catastrophically wrong. Captain Morrison lay unconscious with a head wound, Sergeant Williams had taken shrapnel to the leg, and their radio was destroyed. They'd taken shelter in an abandoned farmhouse as German patrols swept the area. Sarah counted their remaining supplies, enough morphine for maybe 2 serious casualties, bandages for basic wounds, and ammunition that would last through a prolonged firefight. "We're sitting ducks," whispered Private Jackson, barely 21 and terrified. "They'll find us by morning." Sarah checked Morrison's pulse, steady but weak. The captain needed real medical attention, not the field medicine she could provide. Williams was stable but couldn't walk without assistance. 6 soldiers total, 2 casualties, and surrounded by enemy forces who'd shown no mercy to captured Americans. Through the cracked window, she watched German patrols systematically searching buildings. They were being methodical, professional. These weren't desperate soldiers, they were hunters, and her unit was the prey. The sound of approaching boots on gravel made everyone freeze. Jackson raised his rifle toward the door, his hands shaking. Sarah pressed her back against the stone wall, feeling the weight of her father's stethoscope against her chest. If you were trapped behind enemy lines with wounded soldiers depending on you, how far would you go to save them? The farmhouse door creaked open slowly. A German soldier entered, rifle raised, scanning the shadows. Sarah held her breath, watching from behind an overturned table as the soldier moved deeper into the room. Then he stopped. Pale blue eyes met hers across the darkness. Klaus Richter. He looked different, healthier, the pallor of near death replaced by the weathered complexion of a soldier who'd spent weeks in the field. But Sarah recognized the scar along his jawline where shrapnel had grazed him, the careful way he favored his left shoulder. Klaus's eyes widened with recognition. His rifle wavered, the muzzle dropping slightly. Behind him, Sarah could hear other German voices calling out search reports. "Hier ist niemand," Klaus called back to his patrol. "Nothing here." The voices moved away, boots crunching on broken glass as the patrol searched neighboring buildings. Klaus remained motionless, staring at Sarah with an expression she couldn't read. Finally, he lowered his rifle completely. "The American medic," he said in careful English. "Sarah." She nodded, not trusting her voice. Around her, she could sense her unit's confusion. Jackson's rifle was still trained on Klaus, finger on the trigger. "I told you I would not forget," Klaus continued quietly. "You saved my life when you could have let me die." "And now?" Sarah whispered. Klaus glanced at Captain Morrison's unconscious form, at Williams trying to stay quiet despite his pain. "Now, I repay the debt." But Sarah was about to discover that Klaus Richter had been asking himself the same impossible question that had haunted her for 3 weeks. When mercy becomes a choice between loyalty and conscience, which path leads to honor? Klaus holstered his weapon and knelt beside Captain Morrison. "He needs surgery," he said, examining the head wound with surprising medical knowledge. "There is pressure building. Without treatment, he dies," Sarah finished. Klaus nodded grimly. "My patrol will return in 10 minutes. If they find you." He didn't need to finish. Sarah had seen what happened to captured American medical personnel. "There's a field hospital," Klaus continued. 20 kilometers north. German facility, but they have surgeons, real equipment. He looked directly at Sarah. "I could get you there. Your captain would live." Jackson spoke through gritted teeth. "It's a trap." Klaus turned to face the young soldier. 3 weeks ago, this woman saved my life when every rule said she should let me die. I will not betray her now. But you're asking us to surrender," Williams said. "No." Klaus's voice carried quiet intensity. "I am asking you to trust me." Sarah felt the weight of command settling on her shoulders. With Morrison unconscious, she was the ranking medical officer. 6 lives hung on her decision, 7, counting Klaus himself. If his own unit discovered what he was planning. The sound of returning boots grew closer. Klaus checked his watch. Choose now. Stay here and hope they don't find you, or come with me and save your captain's life. Sarah looked at Morrison's pale face, at William struggling with his wound, at Jackson whose hands shook with fear and adrenaline. 3 weeks ago, she'd chosen to save one enemy soldier. Now that enemy was offering to save her entire unit. But everything was about to change, because Klaus Richter was hiding something that would turn this rescue into the deadliest gamble of the war. As Klaus led them through back passages and forgotten trails, Sarah began to notice details that chilled her blood. He knew these woods too well. He anticipated patrol routes with frightening accuracy. When they encountered German sentries, Klaus didn't just convince them to look away. He gave them orders they immediately obeyed. During a rest stop, while Morrison drifted in and out of consciousness, Sarah confronted Klaus directly. Who are you really? Klaus was quiet for a long moment, scanning the forest around them. Finally, he met her eyes. Oberstfreiter Klaus Richter, Wehrmacht Medical Corps. Attached to SS Oberfuhrer Heinrich Müller's intelligence unit. The words hit Sarah like physical blows. Medical Corps, that explained his knowledge of Morrison's condition. But SS intelligence meant Klaus wasn't just a soldier. He was part of the Nazi war machine's most feared division. You're not just a sniper, she whispered. I am a battlefield medic like you. The sniper position was temporary assignment. Klaus's voice carried bitter regret. 3 weeks ago, I was ordered to eliminate high-value targets. American medical personnel were considered strategic priorities. Sarah felt eyes settling in her stomach. You were specifically hunting medics. Klaus nodded. Your unit was targeted. I had photographs, names, unit designation. I was supposed to eliminate the medical staff, leave the soldiers unable to treat their wounded. He paused, studying her face. I had your photograph, Sarah Chun. I was ordered to kill you first. The forest seemed to spin around her. The young soldiers Klaus had killed, they hadn't been random targets. He'd been systematically destroying her unit's medical capabilities. Tommy Martinez, Johnson, the others, they died because Klaus was following orders to hunt down American medics. But when I was wounded, Klaus continued, when you saved me instead of letting me bleed out, I could not continue the mission. The man Sarah had saved wasn't just her enemy, he was her would-be assassin. And now he was leading her entire unit directly into the heart of German-controlled territory. As they moved deeper into German territory, Sarah grappled with the devastating revelation. Every step took them further from Allied lines, deeper into enemy hands. Klaus had tried to kill her, would have succeeded if shrapnel hadn't found him first. But Morrison was running out of time. His breathing had become irregular, his pulse thready. Without surgical intervention, he'd be dead within hours. There, Klaus pointed through the trees to a collection of white tents marked with red crosses. Field Hospital. Best trauma surgeons in the Wehrmacht. Sarah studied the facility through her field glasses. It was heavily guarded, crawling with German medical personnel and SS officers. How do you plan to get us inside? Klaus removed a leather folder from his jacket. Hospital commander is Oberarzt Werner Braun. We served together before the war, medical school in Berlin. He will trust my word. And if he doesn't? Klaus met her eyes steadily. Then we all die together. The approach to the hospital felt like walking into a wolf's den. German sentries watched their small group with professional interest. Klaus spoke rapidly in German, showing his identification and gesturing toward Morrison's stretcher. Dr. Braun emerged from the main surgical tent, a tall, severe man with steel-gray hair and calculating eyes. He examined Klaus's papers, then studied Sarah and her soldiers with uncomfortable intensity. American medical personnel, Braun said in perfect English. Captured during reconnaissance? Klaus nodded. The officer requires immediate surgery. Head trauma with probable intracranial pressure. Braun lifted Morrison's eyelids, checked his pupils. Yes, he will die without intervention. He looked at Sarah. You are the unit medic? I am. Then you will assist in surgery. Your men will be held in the containment area. Braun's smile was cold. For their protection, of course. As German soldiers separated her from her unit, Sarah realized Klaus's plan had worked, but at a terrible cost. Morrison would receive the surgery he needed. But she and her soldiers were now prisoners of war, dependent entirely on Klaus Richter's ability to continue protecting them. But Sarah was about to discover that Klaus had one more secret, one that would determine whether his act of mercy would save them all or doom them to something far worse than death. The German field hospital's surgical tent blazed with harsh electric light. Dr. Braun moved with practiced efficiency, preparing for Morrison's operation while Sarah scrubbed in beside him. Through the tent walls, she could hear her soldiers being marched to what Braun had euphemistically called the containment area. You have steady hands, Braun observed as Sarah positioned the surgical instruments. Where did you train? Stanford Medical School. 2 years before the war. Braun nodded approvingly. Excellent program. I lectured there in 1938. He began the procedure, making the initial incision with surgical precision. Tell me, why did Klaus Richter risk his career to bring you here? Sarah kept her voice steady. I treated his wounds when he was injured. Ah, yes. The sniper assignment. Braun's hands never paused as he worked. Klaus was never suited for killing. Too much conscience, too much mercy. He glanced at Sarah. Dangerous qualities in wartime. As they worked together to relieve the pressure on Morrison's brain, Sarah realized she was witnessing something extraordinary. Despite their allegiances, despite the war raging around them, she and Braun were united in the ancient mission of healing. Her hands moved in perfect coordination with his, 2 doctors fighting to save a life. He will live, Braun announced as he completed the procedure. The surgery was successful. Sarah felt a wave of relief, but it was short-lived. Through the tent opening, she saw Klaus approaching with another German officer, a man whose black SS uniform and cold demeanor made her blood freeze. Oberfuhrer Müller, Braun said, straightening. I was not expecting an inspection. Muller's pale eyes studied Sarah with predatory interest. I came to investigate reports of Klaus Richter's unusual capture methods. His gaze shifted to Klaus. You were ordered to eliminate American medical personnel, not preserve them. Klaus stood at rigid attention. Sir, I believe these prisoners might provide valuable intelligence. Intelligence? Muller laughed coldly. From a field medic and her broken unit? He moved closer to Sarah, close enough that she could smell his cologne mixed with the metallic scent of violence. No, I think Klaus Richter has developed sympathies. Do you think Klaus can protect Sarah and her unit from his own commanding officer? What would you do if your act of mercy put others in mortal danger? Oberfuhrer Muller circled Sarah like a predator studying prey. Klaus tells me you saved his life when he was wounded. How touching. His voice dripped with contempt. Did you know, Fräulein, that your patient had already killed 3 of your unit members? That his next target was you specifically? Sarah said nothing, but her silence spoke volumes. Yes, I can see you know. Muller smiled coldly. And yet you healed him anyway. Such admirable Christian mercy. He turned to Klaus. Which makes your subsequent failure even more inexcusable. Klaus remained at attention, but Sarah could see tension coiling in his shoulders. Sir, I believed, you believed nothing. You felt. Muller's voice cut like a blade. Feeling is weakness, Klaus. And weakness spreads like infection. Dr. Braun cleared his throat. Oberfuhrer, the American officer's surgery was successful. Perhaps the prisoners could provide medical intelligence about Allied treatment methods. Silence. Muller's attention never left Klaus. There is only one way to cure weakness. He drew his sidearm, a Luger that gleamed under the surgical lights. Kill the American medic. Now. With your own hands. The tent fell silent except for the steady beeping of Morrison's monitoring equipment. Sarah felt her heart hammering against her ribs, but she kept her voice steady. If you kill me, your own wounded will suffer. I can teach your medics new trauma techniques, new ways to save German lives. Muller laughed. German medical science is superior to anything America produces. Then why did Klaus need to hunt down medics specifically? Sarah pressed. If German medicine is superior, why target medical personnel at all? For the first time, uncertainty flickered in Muller's eyes. Klaus seized the moment. Sir, the American is correct. Her surgical knowledge could benefit our wounded. Dr. Braun can confirm. Her technique is advanced, her training excellent. Braun nodded reluctantly. She assisted admirably in the surgery. Her knowledge of trauma medicine is impressive. Muller studied them all with calculating coldness. Very well. The medic lives, for now. But Klaus, your failure to complete your original mission requires correction. He gestured to 2 SS guards. Execute the American soldiers. All of them. Klaus will watch, so he understands the cost of mercy. This was the moment Sarah realized that saving Klaus's life had set in motion a chain of events that would determine not just her fate, but the lives of every soldier under her care. Sarah stepped forward, placing herself between Muller and the tent entrance. Wait. Muller raised an eyebrow. The prisoner wishes to negotiate? Those soldiers are wounded. Executing wounded prisoners violates the Geneva Convention. Even SS officers are bound by international law. International law? Muller's laugh was genuinely amused. Child, we are beyond such niceties. No, Klaus said quietly. She is correct. Every eye in the tent turned to him. Muller's expression darkened dangerously. Explain yourself, Klaus. Carefully. Klaus straightened, and for the first time since Sarah had known him, she saw the man he'd been before the war, someone who'd taken the same oath she had, someone who'd sworn to preserve life above all else. Dr. Braun can confirm, these prisoners were brought here for medical treatment. They are under the protection of the Medical Corps, not the SS. Executing them would violate not just international law, but Wehrmacht regulations. Braun looked uncomfortable but nodded. Klaus is technically correct. Medical prisoners fall under different protocols. Muller's face flushed with rage. You dare lecture me on protocol? I dare uphold the honor of German medicine. Klaus replied steadily. 3 weeks ago, this woman saved my life when she could have let me die. She honored her medical oath even toward an enemy. How can we do less? The tent fell silent. Sarah could hear her own heartbeat, could smell the antiseptic mixing with gun oil and fear. Morrison stirred slightly on the operating table, his vital signs stabilizing. Muller holstered his weapon. Very well, Klaus. Your prisoners will live, for now. But you will personally ensure they cause no trouble. Any escape attempt, any resistance, and you will execute them yourself. Personally. Is that understood? Klaus nodded. Understood, sir. As Muller left, Sarah realized the impossible had happened. Klaus Richter, the man who tried to kill her, the enemy sniper who'd murdered her friends, had just risked his own life to save hers and her units. The circle was complete. Her mercy had created his mercy, and together they'd found a path through the darkness of war. 2 days later, Sarah found herself in the strangest situation of her life, working alongside German medics to treat wounded soldiers from both sides. Klaus had convinced Dr. Braun to let her assist with trauma cases, arguing that her techniques could save German lives. She taught them about shock treatment, demonstrated new suturing methods, shared knowledge about infection prevention. In return, she'd learned advanced surgical techniques that would serve her well if she ever made it back to Allied lines. Captain Morrison was recovering steadily. Williams was walking again. Her other soldiers were being treated well, better than many prisoner-of-war camps, Klaus admitted quietly. Why? She asked him during a brief break between operations. Why risk everything for us? Klaus was quiet for a long moment, cleaning his surgical instruments with meticulous care. My brother was a medic in Poland. He wrote me letters about the wounded he treated, Polish soldiers, German soldiers, civilians. He said healing was the only sane response to such madness. What happened to him? Killed by partisans while treating wounded civilians. They did not care that he was trying to help. Klaus's voice carried old pain. When you saved my life, I remembered his letters. I remembered why I became a medic before I became a soldier. Sarah understood. The war had tried to turn them both into killers, but their deepest nature was to heal. It was a strange kind of resistance, choosing mercy when the world demanded vengeance. Oberfuhrer Muller will not forget, Klaus warned. He will find another way to test my loyalty. And what will you do? Klaus met her eyes steadily. I will remember that some choices define who we are, regardless of the uniform we wear. That night, Sarah lay on her narrow cot in the medical tent, listening to the sounds of wounded soldiers from both armies sleeping nearby. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new impossible choices. But for tonight she held on to something precious, the knowledge that even in the darkest hours of humanity's worst conflict, mercy could still triumph over hatred. Her father's stethoscope felt warm against her chest, a reminder of oaths taken and honored even unto death. The medic who saved an enemy sniper had indeed saved her entire unit, but more than that, she'd saved the soul of the man who'd tried to kill her. And in the end, that may have been the most important life she ever saved. 3 months later, as Allied forces advanced across Germany, Sarah Chin found herself once again in a German medical facility, this time as part of a liberation team. The field hospital where she'd worked alongside Klaus had been abandoned, its staff retreated deeper into German territory. In the ruins of Dr. Braun's surgical tent, she found a letter addressed to her in Klaus's careful handwriting. Sarah, if you read this, then you have survived, and I am glad. I have arranged safe passage for you and your unit to Allied lines. It is the least I can do for the woman who taught me that mercy is not weakness, but the highest form of strength. I hope someday we will meet again in a world where doctors need not carry rifles. Until then, remember that the oath we took knows no nationality, no enemy, only the sacred duty to preserve life. Your grateful colleague, Klaus. Sarah never saw Klaus Richter again. But she carried his lesson with her through the rest of the war and the decades that followed, that in our darkest moments, the choice to show mercy, even to our enemies, defines not just who we are, but who we have the courage to become. Sometimes the greatest victories are won not with weapons, but with the simple decision to heal instead of harm, to save instead of death.